what I'll try and ensure is this session meets most of your objectives and talks to you all, rather than making it a very technical session. So kind of confront me and pause me wherever you think it's going off the topic, right? So I think Aniket introduced me, and I think that's what I do in Vodafone. Is a big corporate, but there is a little more to myself that I would like to share with you. So that's about the stories about 6 years ago, where I was in Bangalore, and this one remains one of my favorite cities that I've worked in the corporate life. And I actually started off, and I was actually moonlighting and bootstrapping while I was still working in a B2B company. Very excited. Actually had a great partner from New Zealand. Strange turn of events, how I partnered. That's a story for another day. What we started was actually a comparison shopping portal for mobile plans and broadband plans. And mind you, I was on the other side of the fence of the telecom operators. So there's a big bad world of operators who confuse you with a lot of plans, and our idea was to kind of make it simple to the consumers, that you put your assumptions around what you plan to use, and we'll try and give you the best fit plan across every nook and corner. It worked well, lots of good customer traction, lots of busy hours, weekends burnt. But finally, I think we started losing interest, and the key reason being the revenue model was just not in place. So our model of revenue was about how do I pass the leads to these operators and make money, right? And that was a big boom time in the telecom, where subscribers were getting added in millions in a month. Even if I add 100, it's like a drop in the ocean. So that was a big learning. So great proof of concept, works well, customer need is met, but the revenue model wasn't in place. So where was I, what was I smoking when we all started, right? So that is the feedback to me myself, but always excited to be amongst your startups, though we are now in Vodafone, because the zing is back, and I think the market and the timing, and that's what I would like to share with you about why we think these are the most exciting times to be in this space, especially around driven by technology and bringing world-class products. So let me start with a quick video to illustrate why we strongly think the future is already here.
Drive. What if we close our eyes, speeding through red lights into paradise? 'Cause we know time for getting old. What a body, time is old. Cross your fingers, here we go. My youth is yours. Freu dich auf.
Okay, so the way the video ends is actually a bit in German, because that was done by our colleagues in Germany. So essentially that's about that. And before that, I just would like to put the house in order, because there's a big confusion in where is Aniket. I would like to test his grammar as well. So my title is not prepositions, okay? So I checked the grammar and I said, have I got it wrong? Preposition means something that connects a noun to a sentence, while proposition is in a business context what you offer to customers. So Aniket, wherever you are, let's check the grammar later. So I think we're a strong believer that we are in the perfect storms, and I think that belief is, I don't need to come stand here and say it, and you're all seeing it, and I think a lot of you will be experimenting or would be already be launching these products. Essentially what we think is happening is obviously the flurry of technologies, which is virtual reality or the drones. We ourselves have used drones to deliver the first iPhone 7 back last year in New Zealand and Germany. So you can find more relevant use cases for the kind of market we are in. So those drones, or the augmented reality, Internet of Everything or Internet of Things, whichever way you look at it or call it, Genius of Things, as the other partners have started calling it. But essentially what we think is critical to the success is putting human at the center. So please keep the human at the center, because the interactions around technologies could take you far away from how humans would like to interact. Be it, for example, a lot of banks and we ourselves have put a humanoid in the receptions in Vodafone offices in Europe. The big debate that was happening internally was, what do you call it? What's the gender of it? So you got to be a little sensitive about this stuff, because these will do the task that they're supposed to do, but if they take the human equation away, so you land yourself into some strange conversations. So net coming back, autonomy, automation, I'll leave the buzzwords with you on the screen. These definitely are happening right here they're not actually distant future. And put the context of why the storm is in India. I think these are again big jargons and logos, but I'm very glad that these actually are taking form and shape. Startup India and the kind of conversations we have been having in the last 2 days is pretty much that actually you see the rubber has met the road, right? And so are the other campaigns which we see working, because we work with global enterprises as well. And as you say, Make in India, is it really coming alive? And we do see yes. A lot of companies are talking to us, including Singapore government, a lot of European companies, has they set up shop in India. So these are realities. So I think the storm combined with the market and the government drivers that you see make this as a reality, right? So that's the context I thought I will share with you before we get into the good world of IoT. And here I would like to kind of start with a quick question, and I think where is Sumedha? My colleague, you're here, okay? She's promising some goodies. I don't know whether they're good or bad. A simple question, okay? So who coined the term Internet of Things? Show of hands and then I'll pick. Do you know who coined the term Internet of Things? Okay, that makes my job a little tougher. Can I give you a clue? Okay, it was coined in 98. I don't know how much of a clue is it. Sorry? Negroponte, closer really. I'll tell you why I say it's closer. That's right, George Joshi, right? Koshi, yeah. So it was actually Kevin Ashton who coined in 98, and the reason it is linked to MIT is because there was an auto identification lab which was related to, I think, the MIT efforts of using RFID, and that formed the genesis for Internet of Things. So you understand a bit about Internet of Things is about machines talking to themselves, or machines talking to human and machines and assets and devices, right? So, but interestingly, so the origin of all of this and the first application of some of these technologies was way back in the Second World War. Any guesses what the use case would have been? But the World War was much before. Second World War, unless you're talking to the Cold War. Any other guesses? It is a simple technology there. The clues, sorry? Telegraph was much before. Okay, so any guesses? I'll keep the prize to myself. So the application of that actually was in the warfare, when you actually want to detect a hostile aircraft versus a friendly one. So how do you do that is basically you send a signal, and it's actually radar technology, where the transponder sends you back 1 or 0. If it's 1, you more or less sure that it's a friendly one. You don't kind of fire it off. So it is called the friend or foe, identification of friend or foe. But okay, that's about trivia. But I think we have covered a long way. We actually have today put Internet of Things in not just cars and meters like he said, but in cows as well, by the way. I'll tell you that story as we go. But I think what we thought we should do is, rather than kind of explaining what the technology does, and I promised you that it's not going to be a tech talk, right? It isn't. We would like to honestly share with you some of the learnings of how we tried, how we failed, but also how we succeeded. So the learnings that we have are not just technical learnings, but about the market as well. It's about getting the legal right, it's about getting the compliance right, getting the security aspects right, and getting the design aspects right. If you're okay, so let me kind of show you the first of the pilots that we did. This was the small device that we did, and it's not a big shake, so it's basically a identity card turned into a safety device. So it has got 5 buttons. You map your 5 quick calls onto this. There's an SOS button. And instead of carrying 2 different cards, we really wanted to merge it, because otherwise there's no point. People will forget, right? So we cut the Vodafone identity card in this manner. And the first group that we identified whom we should give this to is the women in the Vodafone offices. So the big learning for us was the moment we launched it, and I was very proud, we clapped. In 1 month's time, the identity card actually form factor changed from this to this. So look at this device, it's this. The identity card turned from vertical to horizontal. So the device that we selected after months of efforts suddenly should have been like this actually, and the whole design form factor should have been very different. So that's big learning. So please factor in some of the SKU approach. That's how the FMCG market approaches. Factor that in right in the design. You can, but don't press because there is no SIM card, okay? The form factor, why did they change? Because we actually launched a new branding, and the Vodafone, the badges changed. So second thing was, it was about safety of women, right? But it's also about the fact that someone is able to access the location of where the employee was. So it's about privacy. So much before this debate about Supreme Court giving a verdict that privacy is a fundamental right, the factor that you need to break that in, I think these are great tools, give you a lot of comfort. Actually, some of the women really applauded the efforts, but their concern was, what if my manager always has access to it? So you got to remove the safety aspect from a line manager relationship to making it more of an employer-employee concern. And we really have to factor in an effort to who should have the controls to this. So we have a different team which handles emergency response. This is called the nodal team. So that's about operations. So when you design a product like this and when you want to take it to the market, the adoption is not because the adoption will be low because not because the technology doesn't work. It's because some of these aspects which the users really are worried about, because these are really, really powerful technologies. The way it could have worked is, if someone pressed an SOS button, within 10 minutes the promise was there is an emergency response sent to that location, 24/7. So that promise comes with a lot of these aspects that one should take care of. So that's been a key learning, I think. So we factored that in when we moved on. Second one is one of my favorite use cases in this market. India is, I think, predominantly still rural population, right? So a lot of it reflects even in our telecom base, which is about 110 million is rural base. And many of the villages in India are still not electrified. So that's nothing to be shocked about, because that's a fact of the land. Now, the concept of grids going there using solar, where the state utilities or the private utilities companies is little far away, because they need to see a case of putting the grid, managing the grid. So the idea was, this worked in, the idea is called M-COPA, and here is a partner whose use case worked very well in Africa. We brought it to India, and we said every household gets this kit. This, I'll tell you what this kit does. And there is a 10-watt solar panel which is on the roof of every village. And that's one of the villages called Kurlod, somewhere around the highway of Nasik in around Mumbai, 80 kilometers away from Mumbai. So each household will get a solar panel, which means you are actually having a microgrid in every house. Now, this device sits inside the home. It can connect to 4 bulbs, this has also a battery unit. All the electricity that the solar is generating gets stored here. You can get consumed out of this. You can also charge your phones using USB and run a solar radio as well. So the battery would have lasted about 48 hours. If you're not using amperage, I'll have to get the specs. One moment. Let me get you that as well. So as I pass this on, so the idea was that actually, so how does the user pay? And in villages, mind you, I think we sell shampoos at 1 rupee, 2 rupees, right? So how do you bring electricity at a micro sachet level? So we coined a commercial way where the users pay 5 rupees per week. The households pay 5 rupees a day or 5 rupees per week, whichever is subsidized rate we offered. And they recharge, because the moment the 5 rupees worth of consumption is done, the battery cuts off. So that's how we built it, and the users would pay using M-Pesa or any other wallet that you can think of. But essentially, what's needed is that battery, that unit does its job, should do its job, because otherwise it's supposed to give power to either the lights in the room or the solar radio. It also has a battery enabled, or the phones, because otherwise villages were actually traveling 1-2 hours every day to just charge the phones. We were also solving the other use case, right? So, and that device has a connectivity, because you need to control the device to check whether it's performing to the way you designed it to be. So we put in IoT connectivity there. So that's one device which can enable you to draw power by paying money in a sachet model, and is controlled and monitored for its purpose. So it's great, fantastic idea, and I think now we're seeing it flourishing, but why did it not scale? One of the reasons was, I think the moment the initial success days were over, there was no adoption. There was no adoption because there was no one kind of guiding them, saying how to use it, how to use it at home, how do you recharge, because it's got actually money model baked into it. So the user adoption was low because there was no seeding the market. A lot of effort was needed to seed these markets to really make it scaling, right? And how do you incentivize the guy who's selling these units? Initially 10-50 units is good pilot, but who sells this, kind of installs this at homes? So think about those as well. The distribution in India, especially when you're designing problems or solving problems on scale, is equally important. And getting those logistics into those hinterlands is not so easy. Even we find it a little difficult given the deep penetration that even we have. So those are some of the learnings from this pilot. Again, the problem was real. Technology delivers its purpose, scaling. So that's big learning for us is how do you factor these into the product design when you want to scale, especially in such problems like these. Sure. So here we had a partner, right? And the partner was relying on us because we have got the penetration in the rural. So assume that the distribution is solved. The question was how do you penetrate the market further and ensure that the adoption is happening, because on a weekly basis, if after 1 week nobody recharges, now how do we do? What do we do? So are you going to make a phone call and asking why did you stop? Maybe there are other reasons why they just don't want to bother to kind of recharge it. So you got to really understand the factors driving the usage. It's not that I lit up the rural households, but there are far more other issues around it. So for example, one of the key things you asked, the actual driver for adoption of these actually was not the phones. That's what we learned. Actually, the moment you put a TV in the room, that's when the adoption of this actually really picked up. The real use case to drive any of these electricity at homes is not phone charging, but about entertainment value there, right? And hence the new form of the product that we have with partners actually also has a TV. So I think there are answers will come from different sources. Some of these are, I think as you learn, pilot it in the market, that's one of the key things that we learned, pilot it first, you will discover something amazing, and something shocking as well. The last use case is something I would like to share is what we call as a market coolers. Anyone knows how many of these units are lying in the market? These are your retail refrigerating units, or the Pepsi or the Coke coolers, or even the coffee vending machines like Kingsman. Nice coffee though. They are actually about 2 to 2.5 million in the market. It doesn't look like a big scale, but the problem is bigger for the companies which owns these assets. They're actually pretty expensive. A cooler of 60 liters costs about, let's say, 40,000 rupees. And it sits on your books, depreciates for those who understand the accounting part. The challenge is the assets are in the field. Unless you send a person to the field to check whether the guy is not misplaced Coke with the dosa batter, actually is a physical cost. You got to send somebody to go and check, is he putting a competition products in the unit that he's supposed to sell my products, right? So the physical cost of audit is easily about 150 rupees or 200 rupees per trip. Now the challenge is basically these assets, if they are not seen and if the guy moves from the shop to the kitchen back at the back, they just write it off. 10% of these assets are actually written off every year because they're not traceable, they're not in a state of usage where you would really want to send some engineer to repair. They're just written off because the cost of getting them back into working condition is just not worth it. That's a huge amount. 10% of, let's say, 40,000 rupees in a scale of 500,000 for Pepsi or Coke is quite huge on a yearly basis, by the way. So the idea was actually we said, let's put technology at play. These coolers are lying inside the retail outlets. So we put a great device that can connect to these coolers. Tells you all the great details. How many times the door was closed, open, right? What's the temperature condition? So is there any motion sensor? Is the owner trying to move the cooler away? So whenever any of these events happen, you get an alert. Basically, you got the data back at your nerve center to kind of really manage and ensure that these assets, which are your business critical, are really in a good condition. Great, actually it worked well. A lot of learnings technically, that actually as the coolers, the GPS back inside the kitchen doesn't work. Whoever is relying on GPS, okay, please think about, always have a backup, okay? So always have a cellular backup. Use Vodafone for it. But keep the technical learnings away. The big learning for me was actually that ROI model was not in place. Goes back to why I failed as startup, right? The ROI model is because I think, is it able to substitute the cost of just write-off? It wasn't. But actually it was doing something more that the companies that we worked with was not even prepared for. It was actually increasing the sales. So the moment they know, if you put a weight sensor, the moment they know that the stock is actually going below the levels, they're actually having the intelligence to go and ship the replenishment stock, which means it's increasing the sales. Have you factored that in the case? The answer is no. And hence, some of these can die, not for reasons of technology, but some of the business reasons, which you should factor in if you're building products for this kind of market. You can put a very good camera just to get real-time snapshots of what's stored in the cooler, but that comes at a cost. So always factor that in mind, saying if you're building a product for this market, somebody else can actually kill you with his Excel sheet, okay? So those Excel sheets are very scary sometimes. So let me summarize those. I think if anyone has some interesting ones to share, please do share, because this is a forum that we would like to learn as well. What are the problems that you are solving? The products that of IoT are actually business transformation. So a VC cooler management with an option to completely prevent the write-offs is actually transformation of a scale that you cannot imagine without actually having this technology. Products to outcomes. It's not about putting those devices, but it's about the outcome that you want from these IoT. It could be the safety of the women that we talked about, who are actually far more productive and more assured of working with you is more important than just actually saying I have a safety product. So in the ROI model, we talked about how critical it is to have that foresight, a little bit of foresight in how this market is going to adopt or receive your product. It's an operational change. IoT drives processes. IoT is very operationally intensive. Like I talked to you about how a safety console got to be thought about, not just as a product, but who is going to who is going to use the data, who is going to benefit, or who is going to action on the data. So it's very operationally intensive. Factor that in mind. Human factors we talked about, privacy, concerns around adoption. In fact, the retailer where we put the VC cooler actually called the company back and said, the company called him back asking, why did you move the cooler? So he actually called them back and said, how did you know I moved the cooler? So for him, actually it was a privacy reason as well. So how is that they're tracking me? Have to put a camera in the shop? So factor that in. Think about those as well when we design some of the IoT solutions. Like he asked, are you doing it yourself? I don't think we believe that we can do all of this to ourselves, by ourselves. It's about ecosystem and partnerships. A simple solution like that safety one had a vendor who is actually working on identity card, a device manufacturer, a chip manufacturer, a module guy, and a telecom player like us, and probably a point of sale for retail whenever we could have taken it to the market, right? So it's an ecosystem at play, and IoT ecosystem is nascent in India. So, but a lot of skill sets around devices and modules is actually flourishing in the market. So it's very good that the entire value chain sits in this market, because that's very critical. A GPS, just adding a GPS module to your device costs about $10. Right, 600 rupees. So if you're planning to launch a module of an M2M module, M2M device, that just a simple module can actually change the entire equation. So think about that. How do you bring the cost down by actually aggregating the volumes in the market? So that's a business problem to solve. But if the ecosystem is in India, we're very happy to work with them, because you can solve market problems at market costs, and not something that works in Europe, you try to bring it in India, right? So design for scale, and I said go to market, think about these aspects. So having kind of run you through it, let me tell you where we have succeeded, right? So these are some of the areas where we learned in the last 3-4 years, burned a lot of time and effort, a lot of partners, exciting conversations. The market actually is quite phenomenal, by the way. Automotive industry, the first connected car, or the connected commercial vehicle, first connected healthcare device, all of them are actually innovations, breathtaking innovations in this market. Made for India, made in India, and solve a real problem. So some of those are something that I'm very happy to share with you. When I said product to outcome, so you got a lot of off-the-shelf glucometers. I'm sure you can reel out 4-5 names easily, saying what are the glucometers you use at home. What's the challenge with that? Can anyone say that? What's the challenge with these glucometers? One is obviously, I'm preempting that the reading could be faulty. Give it a plus minus 10 variance. Sharing data. You yourself have to keep track of the data, note down readings morning, afternoon, night, and take it to the clinician, right? So, and suddenly the diabetes as a condition, which is a big number that India has, 65 million population, which is diabetic. The challenge is when the levels of the glucose levels go low, that's far more dangerous than the levels being high. So if you don't detect that on time, so it can be actually quite fatal. So what the technology, the Diabetic Care as a company, it's a company based in Bangalore. What they did is basically said, I'm not going to sell these glucometers in the market. I'm going to sell a service of diabetes management as a service. So what they did actually is come and you go to them in the clinics and say, I want this service. They're going to package the device and an yearly subscription to a frequent number of visits. But what they can guarantee you is that they know your condition even before you walk into the clinic. That's a promise. And if the levels go low or levels go abnormally high, a call is going to land on the number that you're given as an emergency response number, and someone is going to come and attend to it. And by the time you reach the clinic, the entire condition is pre-known. So product into service, product into outcome, product enables you to promise to the customers far beyond what you can do with just a product. Reva isn't a startup by any means, but before it was acquired by Mahindra, it was a proud startup from Bangalore. So we worked with them for good 18 to 24 months because that's the lifetime a car takes to come to the market. And the first connected car actually was Reva, which we powered. Again, huge learnings because when you're designing a new product like this, you got to be involved at a design stage. You can't come at later just when you're actually hitting the dealer that let me put some great intelligence and device. It doesn't work that way. So they were doing war drives on our network around the area, which is around the Hosur area. And they were actually, in fact, ended up testing our network as well. So that's another benefit you get by partnering very early on. But the key point is, at the design stage, you got to have your right partners, right platforms in place. So that's a key success that we would like to share with you. M-Swipe, again, fintech space. I can see a lot of, quite a few of in the fintech. It's again another proud one from India, from Mumbai. The form factor of the device changed when RBI said it's a chip and pin mandate and no longer just a swipe. So they changed with the market. Essentially, all these devices are again offered as a service, monthly transaction based or a fee based. All of them have connectivity, which is basically wireless. Again, the key point here is it's about, I'll just come to that, your question. It's about security out here because these transactions are by nature sensitive, right? So how do you build security right from the SIM card to the network to the device, the encryption? Those are the design factors that you will have here versus a Reva, which is about ruggedness, withstanding those market conditions, and so on. So yeah, you have a question? With lithium. Okay. So, okay. Yes. Yeah, so the Kindle one actually, to answer you, actually it's a global one. So it's again an IoT use case story because actually the way the Kindle works is they take a type of SIMs called as IoT SIMs. Now they are packaged typically at one place and they work seamlessly across the group. Because that's actually the IoT device that I think probably if you refer to some of you were there in Amitabh Kant's discussion yesterday, he was talking about designing a product for 7 billion. So that is an example of a product that can work anywhere in the globe. That's a promise of Amazon Kindle Fire tablet. It can work anywhere in the world because they've actually embedded a Vodafone SIM which can roam across any network. Even if I don't have a network in a particular geography, there is a roaming that is enabled with a partner that promises you the kind of experience. So that's a great example. Thanks for bringing it up. Great example of designing a product for the world markets. But it is outside India. Lithium, I'm not. Smart locks is another innovative. I think it got covered by YourStory as well. It's a company called OpenApp. And the way the enterprises manage the safety of the assets or the banks manage lockers, the proposition is basically move away from the traditional lockers of 7 levers or whatever number of levers. Put smart technology in place, connectivity, sensors in the locks, and open or close with your smartphone because that's your gateway to the world. So that's another interesting one we worked with, which solves a genuine problem of actually safety is never assured with this kind of locks that we always been having. So put technology to a real problem, I think you get a great success out of this market. So coming to what this is what we picked up in the market. These are some of the successes. These are some of those learnings that we picked up. What I would like to give you is a glimpse of the offer that we have and the kind of platforms and capabilities that we have built. One is obviously the SIM that you and I have in the phones are actually designed to be only for 2 years. And if you try using them in the IoT devices, it will work. Not guaranteed, especially if you're designing meters which are supposed to be 10 years, are cars which have a much longer lifetime of 15 years or by design. You can't use these SIM cards. So use it, but at your own peril. So what you have is an industrialized SIM cards, and I'll pass this around. These SIMs actually withstand about minus 45 degrees on this side to 105 degrees on the other side. So withstand temperatures, withstand pressures, because if you put them in a very high corrosive environment in a manufacturing setup, it got to withstand those conditions. Third is readings. For example, a meter in some cases, especially in the grid transmission, it reads every 1 second. Every second there is a reading being sent to the grid. So the number of read-write cycles, technically speaking, is far, far higher than what a phone does. So right now I'm sure, hopefully, none of you are accessing your phones, so it's idle, but the machines work in a different way. They have their own biological cycles. So these SIMs are actually made for those cases. If you're building a product, factor to this level in mind, because IoT is a very, very specialized domain. So don't kind of risk it to an aftermarket learning. And the second SIM obviously is because these SIMs occupy a lot of real estate in the device. And even if you see the identity card that I passed around, there's a huge SIM slot. I'm not a great fan of that kind of estate for SIM. So what you have is an embedded SIM, very small SIM of this size, and I'll pass it around. And these SIMs are actually soldered onto the device. Once you solder on the device, you get two things. One is you're getting obviously much real estate to put other ICs and chips. Second, nobody can remove them. And that's the key thing. A lot of the issues in the field is people taking SIMs away from the devices and telling you that the rats have eaten the wires. That's the reason why the reading is not coming back. But actual reason is somebody has figured out that here is where the SIM slot of the device is, let me use it in the phone. Okay, so that's about that, but let me tell you how I will prevent you from using that SIM in your phone. So, and this is part of the offers that we have done here that was launched last evening. So I don't know how many of you caught that launch, which is the Ready Startup Kit offer. So what we're offering to you, and I'm showing to you right now, is a glimpse of the platform that we have worldwide. This is the same platform, by the way, Kindle uses. And so is Reva, Tata Motors, JCB, M-Swipe, so on and so forth. We can give you a lot more names. What it allows you to do is basically essentially manage the scale. Firstly, it tells you how do I manage 100,000 meters or 500,000 POS machines or soil monitoring devices or weather monitoring devices which need to get the data back to your nerve centers, right, or operation centers. So how do you manage scale? How do I really know that these SIMs are working, these devices are working? There are some rogue use cases that you will find. Some devices are throwing up a lot of data than they're expected to. So please don't overrun your bills, because at the end, the more you use our network, the more you're going to pay us. So we don't want you to end up in bill shocks. You can control all of it. You can control these machines the way you would like to, sitting at a far away remote place. You don't need to send your expensive field resources to just check whether the device is not reading, because actually there's no network. We can tell you right here, sitting here right now. So that's the power of the platform. It's called the IoT Managed Connectivity Platform. And you club that with this kind of SIM card that you put in this design. And our key design principle that we would like to propagate, and you could agree or disagree with me, is each device that you design, especially a device like safety, has to have an intelligence of its own. It cannot be tethered to a phone and use as the phone's connectivity, because the moment you lose the phone, the actual purpose of the device is lost, especially the critical one. Of course, I can spare that for Fitbit device that we use. They're not mission life critical. But if you're designing something like a glucometer, please don't kind of design it to tether it to a phone and say, let me rely on the phone connectivity. The two use cases are completely different. So one has got its own different engineering aspects to it, different way it sends reading out. So please build that in your design. And that's one of the key things that we'd like to share with you. So essentially what it tells you is, of course, in the booth we have got a lot more detailed demo. It tells you how many of them are red, amber, green, how they connected, active, inactive in the last 24 hours. It tells you when was the last location that the device has latched to the network. It also allows you to ensure that anybody tampers with the SIM and tries to use it in the phone, bad luck, it doesn't work. We stop the services from the network. So those events are detected because it is very close to the heart of our network. And that's what we are good at doing, but the moment we give that power to you, it's completely in your control to kind of design and deploy the way you want. So, and there are a lot more aspects to it. How do you turn off the SIM, turn on the SIM, you manage the SIM the way your product is designed. So a car, for example, and I have no better example than that to share. A car is assembled And as a part of the parts that they get into the ERP of a car, SIM is one of those things that gets in. So the SIMs that we give to the manufacturers also have a barcode. So it's engineering to that level. So you got to think about those. If you're actually designing an SKU, what does SKU contain? It also might contain a SIM. So capture that in. It's tested for not more than 3-4 times that it actually sending the reading back, and then you stop the service, because actually then the car is not sold. Car is lying in the warehouse, going to the dealer, is still not sold. Somebody, lucky one, Taruna buys the car, a beautiful next car. Then I turn on the service. So till then you don't pay me. You pay me very less because you are not actually using the car. So how do I manage all of this? I don't expect you to call Vodafone saying suspend the service. I'm actually dispatching the car to warehouse. No, that's not the way the machines work. So please take the control in your hands. Turn off, turn it on whenever you want, however you want, how many ever times. So it's completely control and power to you, right? So these are some of the design aspects, and I think we can go a lot more deeper, but in the interest of time, let's just kind of move on. That's what the platform does, and you'll find a lot more details in the brochures that we have. Any questions on IoT before we move to the good world of cloud? So we've got a lot of software engineers as well and application providers, and that's my handicap as well. The next problem. So right now in the offer that we launched yesterday and today, it's free for 6 months. So you get up to 50 SIMs which are free, play around, tell us what use case problem you're solving. Happy to kind of hear that. But after 6 months, you got to pay. Basis, it will vary if you're using a 2G SIM versus a 3G SIM. So the use case that he talked about would need probably a 3G SIM because you need high bandwidth. And 4G, I'm not talking, because though we have 4G, the module cost of a 4G is far higher. We are yet to see, there are devices of 4G, but not seen too many of those in IoT space. So a 3G one costs you about 75 rupees. A 2G one costs about 35 rupees after 6 months. Per SIM per month. Okay, so the answer can be two reasons. I think we are the same Vodafone unit that works globally. Globally, actually, we have far better credibility in terms of the kind of deployments. And of course, those are for the advanced markets. So what we need to think about is, are you doing the deployment here and shipping it there? Deploying it in those markets. So some of the markets, by the way, are as regulated as our markets. For example, a SIM traveling to Brazil needs to become a local SIM. So it got to transform. So depending on which markets you have, we can recommend whether you take an Indian SIM and put it, and we'll work out a way to make it roam seamlessly. Or if you think your devices are getting assembled in Taiwan somewhere, we'll find a better alternative. But we can support you both ways. Finally, it's one unit. But in India, we've got a little more aspects that we can guide you on. But globally, we have a different team which will get you in touch with. Yeah. So let's quickly also go to the CloudStore. CloudStore is actually our vision to be a one-stop shop, and that's a vision that we have for both startups and SME companies in India. And they are about SMEs, as by the ministry, are about 50 million. That's another interesting segment that we are trying to reach to. But essentially for startups, and that's the learning that we have picked up working with these companies, with companies like yours, is few things you don't want to remain as headaches is one, managing customer information, sales forecasts, how do I get quick off-the-shelf products rather than trying to use big systems. But as you grow, you got to be supported with. Second, a lot of companies that we have seen are by design field intensive. Some of the companies have a lot of field or workforce who are actually working in the fields. How do you again ensure productivity and safety of those workforce? So let me share two of those applications that we think could be of relevant and interest to the community that we have out here. One is obviously the CRM. So how do we, you could buy it from anywhere. So I'm not saying that I'm not here to sell the story of a CRM. I'm only telling you that Vodafone's approach to this is we actually spend a lot of time saying which are the best products that meet the demands, both the price as well as the feature demands of this market, and try to curate them. So our approach and our efficiency is in finding the best guy, partnering it, and offering at a price that is affordable. That's what telcos are classically good at, industrializing anything and offering it at a affordable cost. So Sugar, it's actually the partner here is Sugar. So you can see those classic CRM components that you have. And let me tell you, I think while we as a big company, you would expect that I would have an Oracle or an SAP. Yes, we do have. But interestingly, for some of the products that we sell, like mobile device management or even some of the other areas, we actually use this product for in-house. So our director would like to call it as eat your own dog food, but no, there is a better phrase, drink your own champagne. Drink your own champagne. So I think before I tell you to use it, have I used it? The answer is yes, right? So that's one interesting one. We think if you have an interesting one, again, this offer is up for like 1 month free for about 25 licenses. Feel free to use it. If you don't like it, tell us why. But if you like it, we're happy to have. Right? Second one, this is one of my favorite products. This, contrary to my IoT preaching, it actually works on GPS as well. But essentially, the use case that it solves is the workflow management, removing complete paper trail. And I will prove it to you that it removed trail for us, not just for us, for other companies as well. You want to do a survey, you want to do an audit, you want to actually send the sales orders for the day without actually bringing the paper back. You want to be given the beat plan. In FMCG world, it's called as a PJP. It's a job plan. So all of this, you can do it using this tool. And this is by a partner called ActSoft, which is called the Mobile Workforce Essentials. We use it for our own service management people, and I'll tell you what's the benefit that we have seen. Essentially, it digitizes all your forms, makes it wireless. It also allows you to integrate with some of your applications that you have, and the work order management or the workflow management of the entire processes, right? You can actually, this also has actually a bit of a social chat aspect to it, social email within the community that you create. So how have we, again, you kind of drink your own champagne. So the use case that we have is we have about 120 service executives across the world, across India. And these are the ones who are actually servicing the corporate accounts, answering their bill issues or solving some of the service inquiries. Essentially, even after so many of years, we still found that actually a lot of it is manual, best effort basis. We don't know whether somebody has actually attended the desk or not. There is no way unless you send somebody to do an audit. So these were still, they looks like a pre-digital era of ways of working. So what we did is use this own product and said, I want to get remote attendance. I want to get this audit or a survey done using this product. I want to get the real-time data on how many desks turned on today, how many inquiries got resolved, how many customers were met, without actually trying to waste my time to compile the reports. So if you have a field use case, this is one good product to have in your portfolio. Again, for 1 month there is an offer, about 2 licenses, good enough to kind of get convinced that it works. You can also enhance it to say, I want to really track and put a geofence around the user. But yes, it comes with that fact that somebody has to use the phone application, and the phone better be a smartphone. It uses the GPS of the phone. So again here, what we're trying to tell you is a large company like us, for a use case that we think is pretty much like should have been solved many years ago, we found some pretty useful way to adopt. And the interesting one, and this is the third topic or the third vector that I would like to share with you. 210 million customers, rural, urban, smartphone penetration, 60 million and growing by the day. Now, one of the things that we talked about is how do you, if you want to succeed in the market, how do you reach this market, especially if you're doing a direct-to-consumer product. Do you want to blow more money and not really being precise about it, thinking that the carpet bombing will work? In contrast, the approach is, can I get actually the real customer segmentation and behavior that I want? I'll show you some of the dimensions. Demographical, age group, monthly spend on telecom or mobile, behavioral, in terms of what kind of phones they use, what are the affiliated services that they consume, do they travel more, do they eat more, eat more at the joints. So using some multiple data, respecting the privacy of these customers, we can help you run campaigns to make you reach to your customers. And that comes again with a good offer that we have, about 50,000 SMSs free if you take the IoT kit. But essentially you can do a lot more. You can also reach out to the rural subscribers if you don't want to reach them using smartphones, using voice. SMS, voice still remain, by the way, there's still good and efficient ways to get scale when you want to do campaigns. And third, obviously, is the digital way. You want to do WAP, you can still probably use our route to kind of distribute your campaigns. So this, I don't know how many of you would be aware that actually telcos do it, but we as Vodafone definitely, we love some of these. We in fact helped a bank launch their new product when they said, give me user base of age group 22 and above, prepaid spends of 200 rupees and above, postpaid spends of 500 rupees and above, using Android phone, and who are actually not yet my customers. So you can actually define these rules and get to still about 10 million of the base, which is worth targeting. Last question before I kind of get to my last slide. Okay. Perfect. There are two ways. The next slide will tell you a different way which you can do it yourself. But one way, if you want to run it, is actually work with us on a one-to-one basis. We'll work with you because what we need to understand is what is the current type of campaign. There are certain rules that we can't allow certain other type of campaigns to run. Let's say if you are promoting my competitor, I don't want you to run on my network, right? Just jokes apart. But essentially, we want to do the good mobile marketing practices, which and want you to kind of look at the campaign you're running. So we are bound by that. So we'll work. So if you just allow me, I'll cover that point as well. So one answer is that work with us one-to-one. We'll solve that problem. But if you want to solve it yourself, again, I'm not going to share the data, but I'm only going to give you the data points. Is we have again this marketplace called the Vodafone Partner Platform. Let me get to this slide. A lot of APIs around does the subscriber is in a DND, which means you should not send him promotional campaign. You can get that. Is he prepaid user, postpaid user, is using smartphone, not using smartphone, what kind of balance does he have, so location of the customer, all of this you will get, but going through the privacy checks, some of them need consent. But these APIs you can write to yourself using the sandbox. But if you want to use it for commercial reasons, we got to have a conversation, because there are certain terms of how the revenue gets split. So standard terms are actually 70% in your favor. So in summary, I think really happy to partner with you. So that's the key message we would like to leave you with. Innovate, or you want to grow, run your business more efficiently, or actually go to the market. We are here to help you out. Thank you.